Welcome back everybody, Dexter here with Current Connected. Today we're going to be teaching you how to mount the Midnite all-in-one. This is a new inverter from Midnite Power. We're going to be mounting it on the wall here with one of these EG4 indoor wall mount batteries and conduit boxes. Now I've already gone ahead and got the EG4 battery and conduit box attached to each other as well as attached to the wall. So we're going to focus on a couple of things such as actually getting the inverter mounted to the wall and punching out the knockouts and the various wiring to get these to work together. So without further ado, let's get started. So first things first, I got two pieces of Unistrut. These are 24 inches long, and these are actually available at the hardware store pre-cut. Now I did cut these off of a 10-foot piece, but you could buy them pre-made if you wanted. These are going to give us the proper spacing off the wall for the inverter so that the knockout holes on the conduit box line up well. You'll see that here in a second. To go along with the Unistrut, I have 4 bolts, some washers, and these are Unistrut nuts that are like the cone type, but you can use spring type as well. Essentially any type of nut that works with Unistrut will be fine. And then I have some zip screws and some fender washers to go with them. This is what's going to hold the Unistrut to the drywall, and I'll be able to hit some studs. These walls have metal studs. You may have to change these screws slightly depending on the material in the walls you're mounting to. This is the mounting bracket for the Midnite inverter. It requires some slight modification because we're going to be using 3/8 diameter hardware, so the holes that we're going to attach this bracket to the Unistrut with will need to be drilled out. I have a 7/16 drill bit, so even though it's a 3/8 bolt, I'll have a little bit of wiggle room. Now that the holes are drilled out, we're going to go ahead and start getting this prepared with our Unistrut. I'm going to insert these cone nuts. I've done the other 3 already. They just push in and twist. If you're familiar with working with Unistrut, you'll understand why I went with these cone nuts versus spring nuts, because there's not enough room on shallow strut for the spring behind it. And now I can get my bolts in here and thread them into that piece of Unistrut. This way I can kind of get things laid out on the wall and get my screws put into the studs. With all of these bolts put in hand tight, now I can use them to square up my strut and get the spacing exactly perfect. I slid this bracket all the way over to one side because the way my stud lays out on the wall, it'll be right about in here at the last slot. So I can get these screws in, loosen the bolts, slide the bracket over, and then get my other screws in. They're going to be right about here somewhere. And it'll be pretty perfect for getting this put up on the wall. Here's a good trick for finding studs on a wall that's sheeted with drywall. You use a really nice strong neodymium magnet and you start brushing it along the wall and you feel for resistance. Now since the screws that they attach the drywall to the studs with are made of metal, as soon as you find a screw, the magnet will stick and you know that's a stud. Now I'm cheating because I have a little mark here. I already found this stud, but I wanted to show you the trick. So like right here, I just drug it by. You see the magnet sticks. I know there's a stud running vertically right there, and you can continue going down the line and wait for another spot right there. See how the magnet stuck? Usually these screws are about every 6 to 8 inches. If we keep going down, eventually we'll kind of find another screw here, right there. So that's how we know that there's a stud running up and down this wall right here. And usually studs are either every 16 inches or every 24 inches. So if there's a stud here, predictably there's going to be another stud about 16 inches over. That's where you'd run your magnet in that range, and we see right there it's stuck, so I know that's where my next stud is, and that's where I'm going to put those screws on the left hand side of that Unistrut. Since the bottom of this inverter is going to sit on that conduit box, if I have it standing up on the floor and measure from the floor to the bottom of this bracket, it'll give me my measurement for where to mount this bracket above the conduit box. And from here it looks like it's 24 inches. Now please don't take this video for the measurement because I think the measurement of this inverter changed ever so slightly in production. So verify that on your inverter before you get mad at me for putting the channel at the wrong place. So now measuring up from the conduit box at 24 inches, I can make a mark, and I'll do the same thing here on the other side. 24 inches up, I'll make a mark. And now I can throw that bracket up here and get it screwed in on the left side to this stud right here. The nicest part about the Unistrut slots being as big as they are and using the fender washers on our screws is we have a lot of adjustability here. We can level this out as much as we need, going up or down, and we can even bump this up a little bit. Now, this mark I made is not the mark for the unistrut, it's the mark for the bottom of the bracket, so I'm just making sure to keep that in mind before I totally anchor this down. I went ahead and punched out all of the knockouts in the bottom of this inverter. These are all the factory knockouts, and I just went to the largest size, and now we're going to flip this inverter over and get it up on the wall. The nice part about this being mounted on the wall with strut is now that it's in place, I can leave these bolts loose and slide the whole inverter over until my knockouts line up, and conveniently Midnite put the bolts on the side of the inverter so they can be tightened with the inverter in place on the wall. That's pretty cool. From here, we need to worry about some of these knockouts. Now, conveniently, this knockout lines up perfectly with the inverter and the conduit box, so I can just put a chase nipple in there and throw a lock ring on the bottom, and that's going to be kind of how I center everything up here. And then I can drill these out and just use a slug buster and punch them out to match the inverter, and just use some chase nipples and it'll be perfect. Perfect, and now that that's all tight, I can go ahead and put a insulating bushing on here to protect all the wires that go through, and now I'm perfectly lined up to get the rest of my holes knocked out. In case you've never seen a knockout punch, this is essentially what they look like. This will punch a 2.5-inch hole for a 2-inch conduit fitting. So essentially the way this works is it's like a press. As you tighten the bolt, it will not actually spin, but it'll create like clamping force and pull this through and punch the metal out. So a good set of these, you can get a nice greenly set like this. It'll set you back a couple $100, but there's also some cheaper ones at, say, Harbor Freight or something like that. Essentially what you would do is put this up through the hole and tighten on the bottom die, center it on where you want it to get punched out, and then tighten the bottom with a wrench, and that will draw this whole tool through the metal, cutting it out of the way so that you have a nice knockout for your conduit to go through. We have our first 3 conduit fittings in. Now it's time for the 4th one over here by the battery input. The first 3, I was able to just punch one of the knockouts out of the conduit box and use that to get started with my knockout set. However, on this one, I need to drill a hole for the main drawbar here in this opening. I don't want to fill the battery compartment below with a bunch of metal shavings and that kind of thing. So an old electrician's trick is just to take a piece of cardboard, kind of tear it to size here, and now this will act as a shield, so if any of those chips come down, it'll hit the cardboard and bounce out instead of falling into any of the connections on the battery. I'm going to be extremely careful of these communication ports on the top, and as well as the battery connections. Again, I'm leaving all the caps on here because we don't want metal shavings in there, and we're just doing our best to keep anything from ever shorting out. On this last knockout, I'm going to be using a little bit of a special chase nipple. This one has an extra insulated throat, and that's just because I want to be extra careful here with these battery cables and make sure if there's any vibration, it's not wearing through at all. This isn't required, but I'd rather give the extra effort to be safe, not sorry. Perfect. Now you can see all 4 of my nipples are in here, and I should be good to go. I know there's 4 other larger knockouts on the front of this inverter, but I just decided I only want to do these 4. 4 2-inch conduits should be plenty. We can do battery cables, PV wire, and AC wiring through these 2, and that'll be plenty good enough for what we're doing here. One thing I forgot are that there are some holes here in the back of this. This conduit box does come with some plugs, so I'm going to get those installed now. The battery comes with some cables that we can use to hook it up to the inverter. They have these special plugs on the end. These are called Degson connectors. It's spelled D-E-G-S-O-N. And they're kind of special, specific to this battery. Now I've gone ahead and taken the end of these. They come with raw ends. I crimped on lugs already because the raw ends wouldn't work with our inverter. They have a 5/16 inch diameter hole in the middle. Now these lugs are 3/0 lugs, despite the cable saying 2/0. If you measure this cable, it actually has the surface area of a 3/0 cable. I think something went wrong in the metric to AWG conversion, but yeah, trust me, 3-aught lugs work great. They cold weld, and I did a cut test to make sure that they are properly crimped there. So what I can do now is feed these cables up through the knockout on the left for our battery connections and get them routed up here to the battery terminals. These terminals use a 13mm wrench. In my case, I'm using a T-handle wrench, and I'm just going to use that to get it snug and then torque it with a torque wrench. Now, Midnite did an awesome job on these nuts. As you can see, the washer is retained on the nut, so that makes it really easy to take them off. You're not trying to pull the washer off of the actual stud itself, and that's kind of a pain in the butt if you've got big fingers. As far as the cables go, the first lug I'm going to put on upside down, just like that. And then the second lug I'm going to put on right side up so that they stack on top of each other, just like that. And then I can put the nut on top and torque it to spec. Same thing for the negative wire, the bottom lug upside down, the top one right side up, and then the nut. The torque spec on these is 15 Newton meters, which is 11 foot-pounds. And I am absolutely perfect on this now, so those aren't going anywhere. And we can now go down to the battery, where we'll take these protective caps off and get the cables popped on. It doesn't matter what port you plug these into. The nice part about these bus bars on these batteries is they're rated for 600 amps. So if you're paralleling batteries, you know, you can add more on the additional ports, no problem. This next section we're going to get into is battery communication. We'll show you how to get it set up and all that good stuff. Now, full disclosure, I got this whole system all connected and ran a few cycles on it just to verify the communication worked 100% perfectly and flawlessly before we showed you guys how to set it up. Here at Current Connected, we're all about our systems being solutions for you, and that involves these kind of tests like we've done here. Without further ado, let's show you how to set that up. First things first, we need the cable that runs between the battery and the inverter. This gray cable is a shielded Cat 5 cable, and this is a standard cable, not a crossover cable, so the pins are same on both sides. I'll be feeding this cable up through my knockout on the right, and this is going to plug into the port on the right that says BMS. So just like that, it will plug in. But there are 4 ports down here in the battery. And the one on the left here is called CAN. That is where the other end of our cable will plug in. Now, I like to make a nice loop here in the cable. That way the inside of this wire box stays nice and tidy. And then it will plug into the CAN port. Just like that is perfect. Next will be the dip switches. That is this little blue block right here. So right now I have it set on ID 1, and this is backward from how most dip switches work. So up is actually off and down is on. So if the first switch is in the down position, that means it is on and this battery is address 1. Now we need to change the protocol in the battery. So in order to do that, we would turn on all 6 dip switches, and that will set this battery to ID 64. Next, press the power switch on the right-hand side of the battery. The battery will turn on, and you'll see a screen that looks like this. You'll want to press the settings button in the bottom right, and then touch the first option that says CAN. It will say, please input a password, and that is top security. It is 123456, and then the check mark. And once you get into this menu, the battery from the factory will ship in this EG4/Lux CAN protocol. You want to touch P04-DY, and that will set this battery to use the Pylon Tech protocol, and that is the same protocol that the Midnite All-in-One uses. From there, you'll press the back button twice to return to the home screen, and now we can go ahead and get this set up the rest of the way. We'll press the power switch on the right-hand side of the battery, and then we will set our dip switches all to the up position, except for the first one that we'll leave down, and that sets this battery as ID 1. There is a circuit breaker on the right-hand side of the battery, and we can open this covered door here by releasing these thumb screws, and then pressing the tab in the middle to flip the door open. From there, we can go ahead and flip that circuit breaker to the on position. Next, flip on the DC circuit breaker in the Midnite inverter, and finally turn the battery on with the power switch on the right. You'll note that it boots up with the 4-segment display on the front, and the screen turns on, and we can see successfully we're in address 1. That's what we want to see here. You'll note that I have the AC input and AC output both in the off position. That's because from the factory, this inverter will have a couple of settings that we'll need to change in order for this to work properly. The rest of this configuration will take place on a phone that is Bluetooth compatible. We're going to be using the Midnite Solar app. When you open the app, you will get this screen to connect the app to the inverter. You'll click here on the green text to scan for inverters. I only have this one inverter available, so I'm going to touch that one, and it is going to connect to the inverter. From there, for this battery configuration, I'm going to select that I'm an installer, and I'm going to enter the password superadmin, and that is all lowercase. The app has connected to the inverter successfully, and we're going to go into the Settings tab and go into the Stored Energy section. And from there, you'll see this option here that says Battery. In that menu, under Battery Brand Selection, you'll want to select Pylon and then click Save. That will get the inverter communicating in the same language as the battery. And there are some other settings here that we'll go through in future videos, essentially saying how much you want to charge and discharge the battery at what kind of wattages. Again, this will be stuff that we cover in a future video, doing a complete walkthrough of the Midnite Pro app. Now, my battery is quite low. It's at 1% because I just got done doing a discharge capacity test. But from here, I'm going to go ahead and get the AC grid input turned on, and the inverter shortly, after about 60 seconds, will kick on and begin charging the battery. Despite the silence, this inverter is humming away right now. There is about 10 kilowatts flowing from the inverter to battery, and I'm going to bring in my phone here. Hopefully it focuses well. I can see right here there is 9.99 kilowatts importing from the grid. So that's exactly what we would expect here, and we can also confirm that on the screen of the battery. So you can tap the screen on these to turn it on, and I can see right now there is 182 amps flowing from the inverter into the battery, and I'm already up to 3%, and this inverter is quite amazing. The fans haven't even kicked on. So yeah, it's working flawlessly, and this will charge back up to 100% from the grid. If I had solar available, it'd be using the solar, but yeah, there we go, working perfectly. So yeah, I mean, that's about it. You close the covers and let the thing work. I'm actually quite impressed by this Midnite inverter. It has a one-of-a-kind feature set, which is really fun for me doing these videos and testing and teaching you guys. The battery is also great. EG4 has an excellent reputation and has been one of our best sellers here at Current Connected. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. You can either leave a comment in the description below. If you have sales-related questions, you can call our office at any time. And other than that, we hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you in the next video.